Beneath the romantic streets of Paris, where lovers stroll and tourists sip coffee at sidewalk cafes, lies one of humanity's most unsettling architectural achievements: 6 million skeletons, carefully arranged, deliberately displayed, not scattered in chaos but organized like art in a gallery. This isn't a mass grave, this isn't a burial ground gone wrong. This is the result of a calculated decision made by desperate city officials over 2 centuries ago. A decision that transformed death itself into something beautiful, something architectural, something disturbingly permanent. Welcome to the Catacombs of Paris, the city that literally built its underground empire from the bones of the dead. Picture this: over 200 miles of tunnels snaking beneath one of the world's most beautiful cities. That's roughly the distance from New York City to Washington, D.C., all underground, all in darkness, and all lined with human remains. But here's what makes this story truly fascinating. These weren't always catacombs. For centuries, these tunnels were limestone quarries, the very source of the stone that built Paris itself. The grand cathedrals, the elegant mansions, the cobblestone streets, all carved from beneath the city's feet. The Romans started it 2,000 years ago. They discovered that beneath the land that would become Paris lay massive deposits of limestone, perfect for building. For centuries, workers descended into the earth, chiseling away stone, creating an ever-expanding labyrinth of empty chambers and corridors. But they didn't plan for what would happen centuries later, when the city above ran out of space for its dead. To understand why Paris buried 6 million people in abandoned quarries, we need to talk about what was happening on the surface in the 18th century. Paris was dying, slowly, quietly, but unmistakably, from its own success. The city had been burying its dead in the same cemeteries for over 1,000 years, generation after generation, layer upon layer, until the ground itself began to overflow. The most notorious of these was the Cemetery of the Innocents, located in the heart of Paris near Les Halles Market. For over 600 years, Parisians had been buried here. Not in individual graves with headstones and flowers, that's a modern luxury. In medieval Paris, you were buried in massive communal pits called charnel houses. When one pit filled up, they'd dig another. When that filled up, they'd simply dig up the old bones, stack them along the cemetery walls, and reuse the space. Efficient? Perhaps. Sustainable? Absolutely not. By the 1700s, the Cemetery of the Innocents had become a public health nightmare. The ground level had risen several feet above the surrounding streets, literally elevated by centuries of corpses. Witnesses reported that the soil moved and shifted as bodies decomposed beneath the surface. The smell was unbearable. Residents living near the cemetery complained of nausea, dizziness, and strange illnesses. Merchants at the nearby Les Halles market found that food would spoil unusually fast, contaminated by the gases seeping from thousands of decaying bodies. But the breaking point came in 1780. A spring rain had softened the earth. The cellar wall of a building adjacent to the cemetery, weakened by decades of pressure from the overcrowded graveyard, suddenly collapsed. Thousands of decomposing corpses poured into the basement like a grotesque flood, filling the home with the dead. The city could no longer ignore the problem. Imagine you're a city official in 1780s Paris. You have millions of bodies, nowhere to put them, and a growing public health crisis. Your cemeteries are full. Your city is expanding. You can't burn the bodies. That's against Catholic doctrine. You can't dump them in the Seine River. You can't ship them outside the city. There are simply too many. What do? Someone remembered the quarries. Beneath the city lay hundreds of miles of abandoned tunnels, empty, vast, and forgotten. These weren't natural caves. They were man-made voids left behind after centuries of mining the limestone that built Paris. The quarries had been largely abandoned by the late 18th century, deemed too dangerous as the city expanded above them, but they were empty. And empty space was exactly what Paris needed. In 1785, King Louis XVII signed an order to close the Cemetery of the Innocents and relocate its contents underground. The city would dig up over a millennium of burials and transfer them into the old quarries beneath the city. The operation was massive, meticulous, and deeply disturbing. Every night after sunset, when the streets were empty and the public couldn't witness the macabre spectacle, teams of workers would dig up bodies from the cemetery. They'd load bones and skulls into carts draped with black cloth and transport them through the silent streets to a shaft near the present-day Place d'Enfert Rochereau. This wasn't a quick process. It took over 2 years just to empty the Cemetery of the Innocents. And that was only the beginning. Eventually, over 30 other Parisian cemeteries would be excavated and their contents transferred underground. Imagine the scene. Torchlight flickering in dank tunnels. Workers wading through mud and water, hauling cartloads of bones deeper and deeper into the earth. The air is thick with dampness and the smell of decay, the echo of voices and footsteps bouncing off limestone walls. They dumped the bones unceremoniously at first, simply piling them in abandoned chambers like firewood in a cellar. Millions of skeletons, reduced to anonymous components, stacked in the darkness beneath the city of light. But something changed in the early 19th century. Someone decided that if these bones had to be here, they should be arranged with dignity, with artistry. This is where the story transforms from a practical solution to something far more haunting and beautiful. Enter Louis-Étienne Héricard de Thury, the Inspector General of the Quarries. In 1810, he was tasked with organizing and securing the catacombs. But Héricard de Thury didn't just see a storage problem, he saw an opportunity. He envisioned the catacombs not as a dump for bones, but as an underground memorial, a place of reflection, artistry, and philosophical contemplation on mortality. Under his direction, workers began arranging the bones into elaborate patterns. Skulls were stacked in rows, creating walls several feet thick. Femurs and tibias were arranged in decorative patterns, crosses, heart shapes, barrel-shaped columns. Skulls were positioned to create visual focal points, staring out at visitors with empty eye sockets. It's beautiful and horrifying in equal measure. Long bones form the structural walls, stacked horizontally like bricks. Skulls break up the monotony, arranged in rows or patterns that create rhythm and visual interest. Some sections feature circular designs, with skulls radiating outward like the petals of a morbid flower. Héricard de Thury added something else: inscriptions. Throughout the catacombs, plaques bear philosophical quotes about death, life, and the passage of time. These aren't morbid or depressing. They're reflective, even poetic. One inscription reads, "Stop, this is the empire of death." Another, "Happy is he who is forever faced with the hour of his death and prepares himself for it every day." These weren't meant to frighten visitors, but to encourage contemplation. In an age before modern medicine, when death was an ever-present reality, the catacombs served as a memento mori, a reminder of mortality. The result is something unprecedented in human history: an ossuary designed as art. Not just a repository for bones, but a deliberate aesthetic experience. Death transformed into architecture. Mortality is beautiful. 6 million people. That's roughly the entire population of modern-day Toronto, or more than the population of Melbourne, Australia, all of them stacked beneath Paris. But who are they? The truth is, mostly, we don't know. When the bones were transferred from the cemeteries, no effort was made to maintain individual identities. Bones from different eras, different social classes, different lives, all mixed together in anonymous equality. Kings lie next to commoners, saints beside sinners, rich beside poor. In death, the catacombs are perhaps the most egalitarian place in Paris. But we do know some things. The bones date from the Merovingian era, around the 5th century CE, all the way to the late 18th century. That's over 13 centuries of Parisian history, represented in skeletal form. These are the bones of medieval peasants who survived the Black Death, merchants who traded in Renaissance Paris, victims of the religious wars that tore France apart, people who lived through the reign of Louis XIV, the Sun King himself. Some notable individuals are known to be down there, though their specific bones are impossible to identify. Charles Perrault, the author of fairy tales like Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella, was buried in a cemetery that was later emptied into the catacombs. Many victims of the French Revolution ended up here too. Thousands who died during the Reign of Terror, beheaded by guillotine, were buried in mass graves that were eventually transferred underground. The catacombs don't discriminate. They don't separate the famous from the forgotten. Everyone is reduced to the same basic elements: calcium, phosphate, and the trace minerals that once held life. Here's something most tourists don't realize. The part of the catacombs you can visit legally, the official ossuary open to the public, represents less than 1% of the total network beneath Paris. The rest? Off limits, illegal, and utterly fascinating. Over 200 miles of tunnels wind beneath Paris. Some are flooded, some have collapsed, many have never been fully mapped, and despite being illegal to enter, they've developed their own underground culture, literally. They're called cataphiles, urban explorers who illegally enter the restricted sections of the catacombs through hidden entrances, manholes, basement shafts, secret passages behind buildings. Down in the forbidden tunnels, cataphiles have created an entire shadow world. They've built art galleries, screening rooms for movies, and even full bars stocked with bottles and furniture hauled down piece by piece. There are sculptures, graffiti murals, and installations created entirely in the darkness. The French police have a dedicated unit, the Cataflics, whose sole job is to patrol the tunnels and catch illegal explorers. But it's a cat-and-mouse game in a 200-mile labyrinth. The cataphiles know the tunnels better than anyone, using maps passed down through generations of explorers. It's not without risk. The catacombs are genuinely dangerous. Tunnels collapse. Air quality can be poor. It's easy to get lost, fatally lost. There are stories of people who wandered into the catacombs and were never seen again. In 1793, a man named Philibert Aspert entered the catacombs and vanished. His body wasn't discovered until 11 years later, in 1804, found deep in a section of the tunnels. Just yards from an exit he apparently never found. The catacombs are also not stable. Remember, these were quarries, massive amounts of stone removed from beneath a major city. Paris itself is slowly sinking, settling into the voids below. The government constantly monitors and reinforces sections to prevent catastrophic collapses. Despite the danger, or perhaps because of it, the forbidden catacombs remain irresistible to those drawn to hidden places and forbidden knowledge. There's something profound about the catacombs that goes beyond history or architecture. They force us to confront something we spend most of our lives avoiding, the absolute certainty of death. Modern society is remarkably good at hiding death. We sanitize it, medicalize it, remove it from daily life. People die in hospitals, not homes. Bodies are quickly whisked away to funeral homes. We rarely see death directly. But in the catacombs, death is unavoidable, undeniable, staring at you from thousands of empty eye sockets. And yet, there's something strangely comforting about it. These bones represent the ultimate democracy. Everyone ends up here eventually, in one form or another. Rich, poor, powerful, powerless, all reduced to the same calcium structures, the same architectural elements in death's grand design. The inscriptions placed throughout the catacombs reflect this philosophy. They're not meant to depress, but to enlighten, to remind visitors that life is temporary, precious, and should be lived fully precisely because it doesn't last. One plaque quotes the Roman poet Horace, "Carpe diem, seize the day." Another, more sobering, "As you are now, we once were. As we are now, you shall be." For many visitors, the catacombs become unexpectedly meditative. There's a silence down there, not just an absence of sound, but a profound quiet that seems to come from the bones themselves, a stillness that makes you think about mortality, about legacy, about what matters. In a strange way, the catacombs are more alive than many museums or monuments. They don't celebrate conquests or kings. They simply acknowledge the one universal truth. We're all temporary visitors in this world. Today, the catacombs of Paris are one of the city's most popular attractions, drawing over 500,000 visitors annually. The line to enter often stretches around the block, with tourists waiting hours for the chance to descend into the Empire of Death. The official tour covers about a mile of tunnels, a tiny fraction of the total network, but more than enough to make an impact. Visitors descend 130 steps beneath the street level, into tunnels that remain at a constant 57 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. The tour is carefully controlled. Groups move through narrow passages, past informational displays explaining the history, before entering the ossuary itself, where the bones begin. The first sight of the bone walls is always striking. No photograph quite prepares you for the experience of standing in a room where every surface is made of human remains. The scale is overwhelming. Millions of bones, stretching in every direction, receding into darkness. Maintaining the catacombs is an ongoing challenge. The bones themselves are fragile, porous calcium slowly eroding over time. High humidity, air circulation, and the presence of thousands of visitors all contribute to deterioration. Conservators work to stabilize the most important sections, using techniques borrowed from archaeological preservation. But with 6 million skeletons spread across miles of tunnels, complete preservation is impossible. The city also fights an ongoing battle against theft. Despite being illegal, people occasionally try to smuggle out skulls or bones as macabre souvenirs. Security has been increased in recent years, with cameras and random bag checks at the exit. But perhaps the biggest threat to the catacombs isn't theft, it's water. Paris sits on a water table, and flooding is a constant concern. Some sections of the catacombs are permanently flooded, with bones submerged in underground lakes. Climate change and rising water levels pose ongoing challenges for preservation. When you emerge from the catacombs of Paris, back into the sunlight and the noise of the modern city, something has shifted. The world above seems different, more vibrant, more temporary, more precious. But there's something else you should know. Something that changes how you see every building, every street, every monument in Paris. The catacombs aren't just beneath one neighborhood. They're not contained to a small historical district. They spread beneath nearly a quarter of the entire city. Under the Latin Quarter, beneath Montparnasse, below the Luxembourg Gardens where children play and lovers meet. Right now, as you watch this video, if you're in Paris, if you're standing at a cafe in the 14th arrondissement, browsing a bookshop in the 5th, or strolling through a park in the 6th, there's a very real chance that 6 feet below your shoes lie thousands of human skeletons stacked floor to ceiling in the darkness. The city you see is an illusion of solidity. Paris is hollow beneath. Every footstep echoes in chambers of bone. Every building's foundation descends into a honeycomb of voids and tunnels. The entire city floats on a scaffold of limestone pillars and reinforced caverns, balanced precariously above an empire of death. And here's what makes this truly haunting. The bones are still settling. Paris experiences regular effacements, sinkhole events where streets suddenly collapse into forgotten tunnels below. As recently as 2023, roads have caved in, revealing voids that no one knew existed. Sometimes construction workers break through to hidden chambers filled with bones that weren't on any map. The catacombs aren't a historical relic safely contained in the past. They're alive, shifting, settling, occasionally opening up to swallow pieces of the modern world. There's a phrase the cataphiles use: Paris has 2 cities, one for the living, one for the dead. But they're wrong. There's only one city, one continuous space. The boundary between life and death in Paris isn't a division. It's an overlap. The living and the dead occupy the same space, separated only by a thin layer of earth and limestone, which means that every moment of Parisian life, every kiss on a bridge, every argument in a cafe, every laugh of a child, every celebration, every tragedy, happens directly above 6 million witnesses who can no longer speak, but somehow still remain. The entrance to the catacombs bears an inscription: Arrête, c'est ici l'empire de la mort. Stop, this is the empire of death. But that's the thing about empires. They don't stay contained within borders. The empire of death doesn't end at the catacomb walls. It extends upward into the foundations of every building, into the roots of every tree, into the very soil where life happens. Paris isn't built above the dead. Paris is built with the dead, on the dead, from the dead. The city and the catacombs are one continuous structure, limestone above, bones below, life and death inseparably woven together. So the next time you see a photograph of the Eiffel Tower gleaming against the sky, or a romantic movie set on the Seine, or a travel poster promising the magic of Paris, remember what lies beneath. 6 million skeletons, arranged like art, holding up the city of light. Silent, patient, eternal. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating historical stories and mysteries from around the world. Have you ever visited the Paris catacombs? Share your experience in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. Thank you.